Hello, and welcome to our launch Zoom for Castle of Horror Anthology, Volume 12, literally Volume 12. And this one is called Ripped from the Headlines. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, standing in for myself and Incher Yo. We are the publishers at Castle Bridge Media, and it has been our honor to do the Castle of Horror anthologies for now about 5 years, I think. And unbelievably, we've managed to hit 12 volumes. Something that started originally as a group of writers saying, "Hey, let's get together and do some horror stories," has turned into something that we've been able to do at least once a year. And I can barely understand it. I'm glad that Intro writes the introductions because I just don't have the energy to do it. And
Mood.
I just want to say I'm going to go through and talk to the different authors of this collection, and I'll tell you what it's about in a second. But really, like we were saying before we started recording, one of the great joys of my life is getting to do this. And someday this will not be a part of my life, right? And I don't know when that will be, but someday it will not. And what I will miss the most is just my exposure to different voices and different people from around the planet with original stories, and being able to be a tiny part of bringing those stories to an audience. And it's a huge honor, and I'm just very, very thankful for it. Okay, so having said all that, here's what the assignment was. The assignment was at this time, we're just going to do 10. We're going to do 10 stories. And I reached out to the community of writers that wander across the transom of my mind, and said, okay, come up with stories that are inspired by actual headlines, actual, articles that had shown up, or documentaries, or whatever it is. And come up with a horror story about it, and come up with something new that we haven't heard. And um, we ended up choosing 10, and I'm going to go through talking to several of them. A couple people aren't with us. You can find Castle of Horror Anthology Volume 12, ripped from the headlines, on Amazon, and it's in Kindle and paperback. And today was in the top 10 new horror releases in both of those genres, which is always, we are beholden to the great Amazon algorithm that does whatever it does. And I actually don't know what powers those lists at all, other than sales, I suppose. But my point is, I don't know how it happens. And it's always nice to know that somebody out there is reading. So find it, read, send us comments, send us email, let us know what you're thinking. Come to our Facebook page, or the Castle of Horror podcast Facebook page, and complain at us, or tell us more of what you want to see. I'm always interested in hearing from the audience, and I know that Incher is as well. Incher especially, because he designs every single one of those covers, every one. And I've known Incher Yo since I was in the fifth grade, and it has always been so amazing to see his talent. Like, as a fifth grader, he was just this like glowing thing that was just in class. And people don't know this, but we made a vampire movie together as a couple of fifth graders. And like, he stabbed me with a broken chair leg because I was a vampire. We,
Mhm.
luckily no prints exist of this film that I'm aware of. So anyway, okay, let's start. I'm just going to go in the order that I can see people on my screen, which is probably not how it will appear on your screen, since you watching this are just going to see one speaker at a time. And I'll try to mute myself when people are talking so I don't accidentally move the camera back over to myself. I'll do my best. So, Dennis, let's start with you, because you're at the top of my screen. You did a story that I think is so freaking daring. Like, because this is a recent story. You did a story around the disappearance of the Malaysian Flight 370, which is I gutsy, I think would be the best word for it. But it's a very thoughtful story and a very sad story. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you came at the assignment and about your story.
I think with any short story call, I'm always trying to look at something that you know, we all kind of have those kind of go-to ideas, right? We kind of think of the one thing that's like the biggest thing that's out there, either currently or within the last couple of years. And then there's some things that are so big that they touch so many lives that we just kind of don't touch. And I had actually just watched the documentary on Netflix about the disappearance of the flight. And I said, you know what, maybe I should do that. And so I thought about it for a couple of days, and then I came up with the pitch that I sent to you. And even when I hit send, I'm like, can I do this? Like, because you do have to, there were so many lives that were affected by it, and it's still a touchy subject for so many families. And we still don't know what happened to that flight, right? There's no resolution to it. And so, it was about, trying to come up with a creative way to tell this story. Um, but at the same time, kind of like you were saying, kind of being a little bit respectful of the families. I don't imagine that, someone in Malaysia is going to pick up this story and read it and then come after me. But I did, as I was writing it, I'm like, I really want to tread lightly. So I tried very hard to not use like names of real people or anything that was kind of that closely related. The only thing I used that was real was the transcriptions. So like toward the end of the story, I added the actual flight recordings
Mm.
of pilots talking to the tower, um, just little snippets of it. And even when I did that, I was like, should I do this? This might be a little too touchy, but I thought it kind of added a little bit of, you know, wonder and fear and all those strange feelings to the story.
It's you know it I'm glad that you did because it's one of those things where and Charles, when we get to Charles, did a story based on the Zodiac killer, and these are real stories, but I've often thought sometimes, as long as you're respectful, and I don't even know what that is. Like, we can't really know it until we see it. Like, but sometimes there's something sort of wonderful about playing in a real space,
Yeah,
making a crazy story about the Manson murders or what have you.
I think that part helps. Like, like I use a creature called the Hantu Raya, which is part of Malaysian history or Malaysian mythology. And, we know that that wasn't it, right? We know that that's not why this flight is missing.
Yeah.
So I think with these stories, like the more weird, for lack of a better word, they are,
Yeah.
the easier it becomes to say, okay, they're just kind of fictionalizing this, and I'm not going to take it too seriously. But I think you still have to be very careful in terms of, the people that you're using, the people you're talking about, the culture. Just like with any story, you want to be really respectful of the community that could be affected by it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's a very nice story. Will, so yours, it's so funny. We go from, like I say, that was sad and based on this great tragedy. Yours, there's an element of humor to it, but it's played completely straight. In many ways, it reminds me of like Watership Down, which retold, the founding of Rome with rabbits. But you told a story of, if I can say this right, a secret society of traveling cats. And so so explain this. The story, by the way, is called Caretakers. And by the way, Dennis, your story was called Ghost Flight, and I didn't name it, but it's Ghost Flight. But Will, Caretakers is your story. Where did this come from? Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so when I heard about the rip from the headlines, I just went through the internet looking for weird stories, and I was looking for something fairly recent. I wanted to really just kind of embrace that rip from the headlines. This is a recent story that happened, but then taking a horror twist on it. And one of the first ones I came across was the story of the cat last year in 2024 who got left behind by his owners on a trip to Yellowstone, and they're from California. And the cat, over the next 2 months, makes his way back, not all the way home, but to Roseville, California, 800 miles. He gets found there, and the chip allows the person who found him to get him the rest of the way home. And, and as I was thinking about this and how could I twist this, I thought, well, what if the reason he got lost is because he saw some vampires? At first, it was going to be vampires. He saw some vampires that were going to attack his family, and he goes off to attack them because that's what cats do. They protect humanity from the supernatural. And so that's where the story started. Then, when I came around to start writing it, I realized I wanted to do this very strange framing device of the letter from the woman who found Rainbow uh, to the FBI, uh, hoping to find the X file. She writes it to Fox Mulder and says, "I'm not crazy. I know you don't exist, but there's got to be someone there that can take a look at this." And she says, "There's something going on more than this because I found this journal." And so the opening is her letter to Fox Mulder, and then we follow the story through the journal that Rainbow, or as he calls himself, Acasitas, I was drawing on a lot of Native American lore for this because, Southwestern United States.
Yeah.
Um, it's his journal. And then the journal ends and he's in a bad way and you don't know what happens next. And then the end of the story is just a normal, the FBI agents show up at the home of the original owners. And so that scene is just third person, limited, very normal. So you've got this framing device at the beginning of a letter, and then you've got this first person narrative journal, which is the bulk of it. And then it ends with this, and it was just kind of all over the place, which was a lot of fun when I was writing it. And when I sat down to write this, once I had that initial letter, the story just flowed out. I think it took
Yeah.
me like 2 days to write the first draft. It just flowed out. It just really wanted to be told.
Isn't that neat when an idea comes to you and you're just like bleh, just like
Yeah.
you can see it. I love the framing device. To me, that's that whole Frankenstein scenario of here's a letter and the letter leads you to a journal and like I wish we had more of it. That always makes me happy. And I love the perspective of the cat. It's just so um serious. Like this cat takes his job so seriously. It
He
was
does. He does. He really does. And I didn't realize as I started it how personal the story was going to be to him. I saw a series of battles against supernatural forces across Western United States. But as I was writing it, I realized, no, this is a much more personal story. It's kind of a trip for him back through all of his past successes. And I won't say anything more than that.
wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Alethea, your story made me cry. I mean, you wrote a story. It's called The Ghost Lake Mermaid, and it's it reminded me of Texas really in a way, and it's a very sweet ghost story. And explain to me the origins of this, honestly, and how you found your way into it.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for that because a mark of excellence was always making my mother cry when I was a teenager writing stories. So I knew if she cried, it was a good story. So when you told me that, I was like, yes. Well, I do think this is maybe the best story I've ever written. The very first thought that came into my head was that I wanted to write about urban legends because there is always some truth behind the fiction. So, what was that headline originally? And the second thing that popped into my head, fully formed, was the first line of that story. They call me the Ghost Lake Mermaid.
Yeah.
And the very next thought after that was, oh, nasty word. This is going to be first person present tense. And I hate writing in first person present tense. I hate reading it. I hate writing it. But I had to figure out because obviously this story needed to be told that way for a reason. And I had to figure that out. So, in a way, one of the mysteries behind the story was for me to unfold. Why did that story need to be told this way? Um, and Mare is our Ghost Lake Mermaid who is telling the story. And there are two other main characters, Jinna, who is also a ghost because Mare sort of ushers all the ghosts that show up in this lake because there's a Merry Death Bridge. It's a small town, small southern town where there are a lot of mysterious deaths. And so a lot of ghosts end up in this lake. One of them is Jinna. She is the most famous woman to ever have come from this small town, a Korean actress. And she came back to this small town to off herself so she could be above the fold for once in her lifetime in this stupid small town. And then there is our investigative journalist, Amy, who is the last one to end up in this lake, and she wants to solve the mystery. But even if she does solve the mystery, can anything happen? Because she's dead. So I was so immersed at the time in K-dramas. I became hooked on K-dramas in like 2021. And I love the layered storytelling. And this story, it became a braid because Mare is one strand and Jenna is one strand and Amy is one strand. And without any of those, it falls apart. And I love how this story comes together. It really is beautiful. And so I'm so glad that it resonated with you because
Yeah.
yeah.
Honestly, ghost stories and people meeting their sort of uh, meeting their destiny just always sort of gets me. And but after we go through, I would really like to ask everybody about tenses, like if you have a tense that you hate writing in, because everybody has opinions about this, and I'm just really curious. Um, Leanna, all right. So everything that everything I read from you feels like it's in a lost collection of fin de siècle ghost stories, basically. There's a certain voice that you have that is very different from the present tense that Alethea was just describing. That's your niche and you stick with it. And I uh and this is lovely. It's always lovely. So it was called Frau Pecta, Comes for the Count, which is a mixture of a true story of a grave robber and a folkloric character that I have no idea if is real. So lay it on me.
So there's this guy who robbed a grave in Key West of the woman that he loved. He was not married to her. He was not engaged to her. He was never in a relationship with her. He was 30 years older
Just
than
this
her.
girl down the street.
Just this girl that he treated for tuberculosis as she was dying.
Mm.
And then he he became obsessed with her during the end of her life. She was 21 when she passed away. And then he spent the next 9 years with her corpse after having her disinterred, and then basically he mummified her, and all of which was not obviously on the level.
Yeah.
All of this was in fact grave robbing, and none of it was something that she had ever let this guy feel that there was ever any kind of connection. So it was just this obsession that he had with her, and then he just decided he would just make her his literal corpse bride. And it's a real story. And so this for me ripped from the headlines is because it did eventually go to a court case
Mm.
because the sister of the poor woman, Elena Hoyos, she was a real girl. She was a Cuban immigrant. He himself was a German immigrant who called himself a count. And this is all in the 1930s in Key West, Florida. And this became such a media circus, because when the sister asked about uh, her sister's grave and why it hadn't been tended to, because the count had built this elaborate mausoleum. It's this whole thing. Like if I were to go down every aspect of this story, and in any other fiction capacity, my editor at Kensington would say this is too unbelievable. Not all of these things. What do you mean there's an airplane that he put her in to cure her tuberculosis from radiation from space? Wait, what? There's so many completely bonkers things in this real story, that I didn't even really know where to start. And I was so mad that there's this big court case. The sister finds out that this man has taken her sister's corpse. He shows it to her, like, look what I've done for your sister. I'm keeping her, preserving her. She's this it's horrific mannequin of a body. And then there's a court trial because it was in fact, sort of a grave robbery and defilement. There was a couple of other charges, but because it had been 9 years, it was the statute of limitations was up.
Wow.
So this guy never faced anything. And sentiment at the time was a little bit more on his side, thinking it was kind of romantic or whatever. And I was like, no, this is just gross. And there were other details about it that were additionally gross that didn't actually make it into the court transcripts at the time. And I was so upset about it. And I'm writing this for my nonfiction. So I found out about this story because I have to write a book called America's Most Gothic Haunted History Stranger Than Fiction. And a guy who calls himself a count and creates a corpse bride that's pretty gothic. So I was like, all right, this checks the box for my nonfiction. So I was already writing this chapter. And then I just got so upset about it. And I was so mad that he never faced any kind of justice. So I was like, I'm going to have somebody haunt him. I'm going to have somebody haunt him so hard that he's going to want him to Germany is going to come to haunt him because he's making our people look bad. So like, as myself, the child of German immigrants, and the idea that like, what if like a folkloric god came and like collected him? And so I thought, okay, what is some scary German folklore? Because my ancestors, they got some weird stuff back there. So like, my people come from the Black Forest, and Black Forest witchy stuff. Whoo. So Frau Perchta is a real goddess. She was Berchta, the Shining One. She was like a co-leader of the Wild Hunt. She was in pagan times this goddess to whom young mothers would turn to for protection of their babies. And she was this great protector goddess. And then the Christian church turned all of that and made her into a witch figure. And now she's sort of like a female Krampus figure, where she is somebody that if you don't have your house clean, like she'll slit your belly open, in this inversion of protecting a mother. And so for me, the duality, she is considered a dual nature figure, even in the pagan understanding of her, let alone how she's become more of the Krampus figure of like, don't, behave yourself kind of thing. And so I thought, well, what if a ghost who's watching this whole proceedings, a German ghost who sees this all happen and basically just says, you're making our people look bad. And so that was my whole framing device, to be able to tell the story from a woman who's watching it unfold at the time and is horrified that this is not right, this is not proper, this is not how Germans behave. And I'm calling a goddess to come and take care of you. So that for me was, it came purely out of my need to have justice, which is where a lot of my stories come from. It's like ghosts enacting revenge. It's like that's kind of my
ghost enacting revenge does pop up a lot, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the last one too. That was a lady ship captain enacting revenge. Yeah, so yeah, if you come for the revenge, stay for the ghost story.
I love it. There's also there's a gender aspect to it. This notion that this asshole, sorry, I don't even know if I can curse on my own podcast.
I mean, are you an FCC violation right now? I don't know.
That this guy can just go, well, I think that I get to decide what to do with this woman's body. Like that's, in death. It's incredible. Yeah, that Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a heck of a story, and it's beautiful. Um, Melanie, I want to move
Yes.
to yours, and you have this felicity for sticky texture that even finds itself in the title, which is called Sentient Slime. And this 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 story is about a man. It's another grave robbing, sort of. It's about a man who steals Einstein's brain. And first of all, is this a true story?
This is a true story, which is what like drew me to it like a moth to flame. Like when you gave like the kind of pitch for us to Google, I was like literally just looking up a bunch of news headlines and I wanted the one that I couldn't leave to be the one that I wrote. And when I saw that news headline, I was like, wait, that can't be right. I was like, everyone would surely know about it if that was true, that Einstein's brain was stolen from his corpse. I was like, surely everyone would know that if that was like true. Um, but yes, no, not ev I certainly didn't know. I'm sure people do, but I was not in the circle of people who knew. So my fascination took me down the rabbit hole. The one thing that I think some people will contend is, was it stolen or not? Some people are quite defensive of Thomas Harvey, the
Hmm.
man who took the brain, but I think if you research, it's quite clear that it was Einstein wanted to be like cremated, first of
Oh,
all, and he wanted there to be no shrine where anyone could come to worship because by his end of life, he was quite an enigma and people were obsessed with him. And he didn't want people to be able to come at his to his grave and worship him like some god. So he wanted to be disposed of in a secret location. So the brain being taken was a huge breach of everything, human rights, from what I can see. So yeah, that's where it started.
but it's a horror story. So that's what's interesting is we'll we you guys you pick something that is a story and then it becomes horror. Like and in this case, the interesting thing was to me, the horror was in just the frustration that Salieri and Mozart are not actually the way they are in Amadeus. Okay, so set that aside. But going by the guys in the movie, if Salieri were to, you know, somehow steal Mozart's essence, he still wouldn't be Mozart. You can't actually, it doesn't work that way, you know, and so this guy's just utter mediocrity is what is kind of the most horrifying thing about it. And
Well, yeah, that's something that stood out to me, and I kind of played up that part because it just, what he did didn't really make sense. But there were little tells in the documentaries and the articles I read that he was quite obsessed and idolized Einstein himself. And he hoped that by researching the brain, that would kind of be his ticket to like making a name for himself. But as the story tells us, it was not the case
yeah.
in the end.
Yeah, it turns out I love stories like that. There was one that J. Michael Straczynski came up with, which was about a guy who had this amazing superpower of never feeling pain, but it turned out it did him no good whatsoever. Like he, um, there wasn't very much that he could do in a superpowered sense, and he basically just led a more or less meaningless life, hoping for recognition and never finding it. Those are so triggering for me because we all struggle as we get older with what are we doing with our lives. And so I love reading stories that are exactly about uh, that problem of wanting more and not quite ever finding it. It was very well done. I thought, but yes, the stickiness and the texture is something I think you always has come to really well.
Thank
So,
you. I was trying to really create like a like gag reflex almost with how really tried to like write the sentient slime gross. And yeah, like I say, like people have different interpretations of that story, but to me it was quite clear that just the way the brain was handled in the end, for me, that was the truly horrific part. The treatment of like a human cadaver and somebody like who had been quite a great person of the time, and to like just like slicing and dicing it up into like the actual footage. So the part at the end of the story where they actually like slice up the brain in the kitchen, that is like word for word a scene that I saw in like unfold in a documentary where this Japanese professor went in search of the brain after all these years looking for it. Like, where is it? Who has it? Is it still around? And he tracks it down after this long journey. And that scene is real. I can show you footage of that exact scene where the flies come and they get a kitchen knife off the table to cut up the brain, and he gives him a little piece in a thing, and after he's like singing karaoke celebrating his great mission. It's wild. It's wild to watch. The true story is horrific. The addition of the sentient slime kind of lurking behind these people who did this was very easy to add.
I love it. Thank you very much. And it's a great title, by the way.
Thank you.
Um,
All of our
Martin,
faces right now about the
yes, 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 yes. Um, Martin Ott, you and I have worked together before in novels, and you have a very interesting background in the military, and a very technological way of looking at things that you bring science to your stories, which I think is really cool. And Ghost Chat, Ghost Chat, your story. Um, was another very touching one, but it's strange that it's a touching one that is dealing in the world of AI and even just corporate shenanigans. But to begin with, it's about a female executive who's losing control of her company, and she is a genius when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I loved this character, and I loved the struggles of a person dealing in grief and having to deal with the jerks from her company going, well, gosh, we want to be supportive of you, but when are you going to come back? And maybe we need to steal your company from you. Would that be okay? Like it. So tell me a little bit about Ghost Chat.
Sure. Thanks. First of all, this whole topic is wonderful, wonderful, a wonderful idea for an anthology because I'm obsessed with this, and I have been. I spent a whole year writing a book of poetry, fake news poem. It was a poem, pulling a poem of week from of the headlines, and I've always loved this as sort of a genre. But I came to this as kind of a roundabout way, which is just a conversation with a friend who's a significant other works in grief
Oh,
management.
sorry. Yeah, I didn't have to. I didn't.
Go ahead.
Oh, sure. And so working in grief management, and it was really worthwhile work trying to use AI to make lonely people feel a little bit better. And I heard this, and later I researched it, and there's these firms that are doing that. A lot of things are happening in AI, but of course, we being fiction writers, we think, oh, what you hear this touching thing, and you think, well, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen that can happen from this sort of thing to try to give people a touching, a sort of emotional resonance. Yeah, and I just thought of this character who lost their husband, their significant other, working in a company. Probably it was pets, sort of pet AI, and probably her genius wasn't going anywhere, and just unplugged, obsessed about replicating her dead husband as sort of a mirror image or an AI, and kind of putting him in the basement or sort of the lower floor of a house. And I guess what happens is when you put things in the basement, whether or you kind of grief or anything else, it tends to come out into the light of day. And this is what happens. The husband finds a way to integrate, not just in these conversations she tries to keep trying, but it escapes. And we don't know right away because the husband wants to take care of the scientist's wife, but punishing coyotes and kind of like sort of it's a sort of a serial killer's sort of path towards bad things happening and kind of getting involved in her family life,
Yeah.
daughter's bad boyfriend and a bad sibling, and her problems start getting solved, but get solved messily. And when I was writing this, I remember thinking, even before like something like Stephen King, like Monkey's Paw, like something like really, like boy, the sort of the whole thought of you get what you wish for, you really want to be with this person forever, but there's things that can come out of that, and the AI started actively taking more control, actively started doing things, and the rub of it eventually is that she, and it's sort of a choice at the end, she can get her company back probably, um, at a cost. And I've spent most of my career in corporate America, and it's been a messy, awful business at times. And I like writing about the workplace at times because there's some real horror that happens in these places. Some real triggering things. But so that's kind of culminates in, I don't honestly know what she's going to do. She can kind of lean into this thing that she realizes she unleashed, that she tried to keep separate, or not. And it kind of reaches a head by the end. So we don't know.
That's I love that there are lots of places it can go, and I love this concept of there are certain things that are just parts of our lives, right? And I'll say this quickly because I know we have to move along, but you lose people, you eventually die yourself. Those two things, there are people on this earth who will always be trying to take those two things away and go, there's got to be a way I can live my life without losing people and without dying myself. And none of the solutions they come up with ever actually turn out to be wise. I'm fascinated by chat AI companions. There's been articles recently about people who you have a chat friend, right? And like a boyfriend, and I remember reading articles about this woman who developed a relationship with a chat AI that she's married, but this guy, it wasn't a sex because it won't sext with you. It's just all it does is talk to you, but it remembers what you like, and it knows, it can pick a playlist for you, and it remembers your birthday. And she found, despite herself, that she had stumbled into having an affair with an imaginary person in her computer. And it was just fascinating to me, but the problem is that by doing this, you're putting off dealing with the real things in your life, such as you lose people and eventually you're going to die. The rest is just, it's just like alcohol. It's just taking away that reality wonderful. Really, really neat. Very, very interesting. Um, Claire, you're in a whole different universe from Martin's, still a highly technological one, but going all the way back to Apollo 11, which was what year? I'm sorry, I can't remember. Um,
Please don't make me do facts outside of
I,
the auspices of being able to rigorously fact check
I
this.
want to say I
I'm
want to say
already
it was like
afraid. I'm
69
afraid of people being able to get right on me. I know it's actually I checked because I wanted to use a piece of music. I wanted to use "I Got You Babe" by Sonny and Cher.
yeah,
So it is a year where Sonny and Cher's "I Got You Babe" could conceivably be playing on the radio. Yes,
69. Everybody's saying 69. It
that
wasn't
does
me.
sound right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I,
I'm so
I
sorry. I don't want to be wrong because I'm already afraid of people who really love space coming for me.
No, no, no. It's totally cool. Anyway, but to go back to setting it up, um, your story is called Michael Collins on the Dark Side of the Moon, and it is a story of Apollo 11 and of an astronaut whose job it was to to stay in the craft and circle around the moon and be out of incommunicado for a period of time. And the funny thing is, that's a very techie, science fiction-y kind of not even science fiction-y, it's a very techie science story kind of thing. But you turn it into this very extraordinarily eerie and even scary, and then very adventuresome story of a doppelganger. And by the way, are you aware of the Far Side? What was it called? I think there was a movie when I was a kid called The Far Side of the Sun that grappled with this idea that there was a doppelganger universe like right on the other side of the sun from us and everything. Have you might be so young that you've never heard of that. But
I haven't heard of it, but I do love it. I mean, I'm sure some of you remember Jordan Peele's Us. So the
oh
idea of
yes.
like dark doubles is very, very creepy to me. And the doppelganger in my case is brought about through, I think, what I'd consider to be quite like a non-consenting, violating thing to bring about a doppelganger.
Yeah.
So that might have sounded even creepier than I intended. Uh, Am I still here? Yes, I am, because my phone's running out of battery. I'm giving you the full Blair Witch experience, and it's just shaky cam. Uh, yes, I wanted to go with space. I wanted to go with space. I'm a former journalist. Is anyone else here a former journalist? No. I used to work in, yeah, yeah. I used to work in news, and we have a saying, if it bleeds, it leads, which is a really creepy thing to say, and I really love it. I think there's even a Stephen King anthology of a similar name called If It Bleeds.
Mm.
And I just remember a long drive home with my partner, and I'm like, oh, this they're calling for pictures again. Like, what am I gonna do? Oh, I don't know. Spontaneous combustion. I thought that'd be sick because I was like, well, quite often I'm so stressed that I feel like I'm gonna just burn down, and it's so creepy that this can happen. Uh, but we were talking about space, and we were talking about. I hadn't actually heard because we all know about Armstrong and Aldrin, and you know that they kind of have the main character energy. They're on the moon, but there had to be a guy who would bring them home, and I thought it was incredibly eerie the idea that for about 40 minutes, when you pass along the dark side of the moon, there would be a period where you would not only be further removed from anyone in humanity in the history of humans,
Yeah.
um, you would just be like historically lonely and unable to reach anyone, call for help if anything happened to you, and that the only thing worse than being unbelievably alone would be being not alone in that moment. So
this is being recorded.
what am I hearing?
Oh, no, we just had some noise. It's okay.
Okay. Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you for the awesome theme. It was really interesting because there's so many things you can do with this. I do consider space to be extremely creepy and also potentially funny. One thing I was definitely going for. No, yeah, she's always listening. This is really creepy. I'm pretty sure I'm the evil one though. My doppelganger.
I, you have to be inspired to find, like, not everybody finds space creepy, but I can absolutely go there with you when you present it that way. And that's what's so interesting about different writers approaching the same subject. Like, you listen to Asimov back in the 50s, and he only was joy. It only was just this awe of but you looked at it and you found horror. And I really like how you present horror, Claire, where
Yeah,
just
thanks.
this sort of resonant thing in your body that is reacting to the world around
There is a lot of horror in there, Jason. I guarantee. I No, one of the logistical difficulties of space is like one, we both know a lot about it, and we also two don't know a lot about it. Like I can sort of imagine going insane and chasing a brain. Like I could definitely do that, Mel. I could do that. That could be me. But like imagining things in space and the logic that has to follow. One of the things I had to do was interview an astrophysicist to make sure that what I was writing sort of checked out in terms of like the logic of how you would fight an attack in space.
Yeah.
How could you and would you fight to the death in space? And if so, doing what? Some of the things I added for just sheer absurdism and just to sort of tickle myself as well. Because like this guy, Michael Collins, the third man, the getaway pilot who's like piloting Columbia around, He was a funny guy. He was really funny. I learned this from like an oral history with NASA. He explains that they like showing him all those Rorschach tests, and
Yeah.
he says that one of them looks like nine polar bears fornicating in the snow. And I'm like, you're a rat bag. You were a very, very funny man.
It's so funny that that story is really achingly just creepy and also suddenly weirdly gonzo violent. And so that it's really neat. I mean it's a neat story. Thank you very, very much. Charles. So Charles, you also did something that I thought was really pretty daring. Because like I say, Claire is writing about Michael Collins, but there's it's not particularly sacrilegious to stumble into this universe, but there's something about the Zodiac killings that still feels um really tender for us, and possibly because nobody was ever successfully prosecuted for those crimes. And you did a supernatural adventure uh, involving the Zodiac killer. Uh, and by the way, I love that that's your niche, Charles, um, is is basically really good old-fashioned just adventure stories like Max Brand would have written. And so so talk to us about Paradise, and that's Paradise with a C.
Well, it's interesting because I actually had the idea before you contacted me. I'd stumbled on a documentary on YouTube, and they were talking about the cipher messages that the Zodiac had sent. And one of them had been decoded at the time while the murders were still occurring. The other one had only been decoded a couple of years ago, and a couple of the others have not been decoded. And I found that very interesting. But what really caught my attention was something he said in one of the letters to the police and the newspapers, that the people he was killing would be his slaves in the afterlife, which he called paradise, misspelled with a C. And I thought, what a terrible fate. And much like Leanne, I was like, I could do something about this, but I have to, you know, find a way to do it. And so I kicked that around a bit, and I got the email from you like 3 days later. And I'm like, well, this is fate. I
Yeah.
guess I'm writing this. Uh, so I sat down and started working on it. But one of the things that I did try to do to sort of mitigate what you're talking about, I really only touch on one of the original murders, and it's just enough to let you know what the person would have seen if this psychic medium is in his head. He's seeing what the person saw. The others were all new murders. So I tried to be respectful of the people who actually died and stay away from those cases as much as I could. I just dealt like, and it's not the original Zodiac killer. It's a new guy doing the same thing for the same reasons.
Right. Right. The I'm always fascinated by that case, and the notion that somebody would say, "Oh, I'm going to be a copycat killer." Yeah, like it's such a crazy idea that you would suddenly go, "Yes, the Zodiac had these completely uh insane ideas that he was going to kill people, and by the way, trap them forever. So somebody's loved one is going to be that person's slave in the afterlife." But then, so he's got that crazy idea, and then some other person reads that and goes, "Oh, I think I have that idea too," which is just
Yeah, life
absolutely.
goals. Yeah.
I mean, but it, I'm saying something, I guess, sort of obvious, but it makes no sense.
Mm-mm.
It just makes no sense that you would adopt somebody else's completely made up cosmology, assuming for some reason that it's true. But yeah, it's wonderful to go from the sort of creeping horror or the sticky horror
I,
word
I,
for
I call it action horror.
action horror?
But
Very good.
what I always tell people, because I will say I'm not a horror writer. I write in more than one genre. I'm an action adventure writer.
Right.
And so if I write a Western, it's an action adventure Western. If I write a crime story, it's an action adventure crime story. And if I write horror, but I'm interested in many things, but I really enjoy writing action adventure. So anything it's actually how I got into the horror writing gig, because the late James A. Moore, he was trying to write a crime novel with horror, and he asked me to help him with it.
Mm.
So that brought me in because he had read enough of my, sword and sorcery and that kind of thing. And he was like, well, you know a lot about crime and you know a lot about action. So come and do this with me, which I did. So
It's funny, I mentioned earlier that it reminds me in a way of Max Brand, and Max Brand actually wrote, and I don't even think that was his real name, but he wrote Westerns, but he also wrote a lot of horror and
mhm.
a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, it's fairly common with
Yeah.
pulp writers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Um, uh, Thank you very, very much. Carmen Gray, hello and welcome. Uh, So you wrote about something that has actually fascinated me for many, many years, which is the Lalaurie Mansion in New Orleans. And there's many ways to approach that story and to bring that into a story. But uh talk to me a little bit about like what inspired you about that. By the way, I think that New Orleans is like one of the most haunted places on earth, and I don't even necessarily believe in ghosts, but I'm telling you, New Orleans is one of the most haunted places on earth, and a central location for that is the Lalaurie Mansion. But
Well, first of all, thank you so much for letting me join late. I apologize, but I was busy and tied up at a meeting before I came.
oh
But
yeah,
anyhow, so the story, basically, I love New Orleans. It's got this electricity, it's the most. I've traveled to so many places, but New Orleans has a very unusual vibe. I'm sure those of you that have been know it. Um, I really was fascinated with that story about the woman, the widower, and the widow, and the whole backstory to that mansion. And
Delphine Lalaurie was the
he's
woman who tortured so many people. But yes.
she's horrible, but also she herself was so traumatized and just passed along the most awful trauma to the slaves that she had, that she tortured. And it's such a sad story, but I really liked the idea of this modern woman who had some sort of connection, and tapping into the ghost of the woman who started the fire so she could escape. And so I wanted her to kind of show what was happening to the audience, to the readers. And that's the way I wanted it to be like kind of like you don't realize it till the end that she's no longer with us, right? And that's how she's tapping into the ghosts that are there. But I don't know. I was already inspired because I'm writing a novel. I just finished a novel where the protagonist travels to New Orleans and she taps into the ghosts that are in New Orleans. She understands and learns about modern day voodoo.
Yeah.
But that is a very fascinating subject for me. Also, I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Sinners.
Not yet.
Okay. Which is amazing. And I love that whole idea of being able to channel spirits from your ancestors in the past, and also kind of even projecting into the future a little bit. So I loved the time travel idea and the connection to history, the connection to
Yeah.
the past and to ghosts. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. It's one thing I really like about that story is the characters, the mansion's right over there, and you know it'll. I hope it inspires people to look that story up because that, in fact, you know, that's actually something that we could hope generally for all of this is somebody to go, okay, so what's the background of this? And in fact,
Right.
I found that I'm more likely to look something up if I hear about it in two different places. Like if I read a short story about something and then I see that there's a documentary about it, I'm more likely to pay attention to both of those things. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Like somehow the two nodes, but thank you so much for including that because I think wonderful is the wrong word. It's a shocking topic.
It's
Um,
very, yeah, it's very shocking and it's very sad. And it's the thing is, it's such an ingrained part of our American history that we look the other way about still, and I wanted it to be entertaining, but also and have a little social message, socio cultural message
yeah.
for the reader and do a little bit of educating. Like you said, you hear a little bit here and a little bit there and it starts to be part of your consciousness, so you want to learn more about it.
I love that. I did a Lawlery story a long time ago.
Ah.
Because one of the victims had been broken and twisted and healed so that she resembled the story said nothing so much as a human crab. And
Ooh.
and so I thought, well, what if her ghost is she's called the Crab Lady and she just
Ooh.
has these just she just emanates knowledge about what's going on in the ghost world and the crab lady knows everything and
Wow.
I miss that character. I think I should dig that character up. No pun intended. The okay, I want to ask you guys and I know we're over time and I apologize but if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you guys about, and anybody can talk, how you come into how you're going to tell the story. Because Alethea mentioned, hey, I realized I'm going to do this thing as as present tense, first person present tense. Or you might decide hey, I'm gonna make it third person present tense or good old fashioned third person past, and I often write third person past and extremely strictly over the shoulder of one person so that you never deviate from that POV. But but you can also decide to be omniscient. You don't see it a lot anymore, but where you just head hop like to everybody. But how do you decide? And you can talk about where you're most comfortable or how you figure out what you're going to do. And if anybody wants to go first, that's
I
I'll,
don't mind starting. Oh, oops, sorry, go ahead.
we had three that were going to start first. You go ahead.
Okay. I feel like writing in first person is very powerful. I choose to write in first person when I'm wanting the reader to be in my head, like at my head as the protagonist, as the storyteller, rather than third person. Third person works really well too sometimes, but I feel like it's creepier and a way to tell the story like you're in it. You are going through it in first person. I don't know.
so it's
That's
more personal. Yeah, no, I get that. I don't even understand why people complain about it because there are people who are like, oh, I don't like first person or something, as if it's easier or some. I don't know. I don't know what the complaint is about first person narratives. Charles, what were you going to say?
Well, I actually should have mentioned this when I was talking before, but this is, I think, the third story I've had published about a series character. It's Sir Gawain, and it is actually the Sir Gawain. He's 1600 years old, but I often don't talk much about that in the story. I just move right along. And but when I started writing that character for the last 10 years, I've written virtually nothing but third person past tense.
Mhm.
And for some reason, that character started talking to me in first person. So it took some adjusting because I was not used to that voice, which I used a lot when I was a kid. But it seemed to work very well for the character. And what I'm usually trying to go for is he's compassionate. So even though he's having to kill monsters and do all these things, he feels for the people that are being harmed and for the people that are affected by these terrible occurrences. So it's been really interesting for me, but it is something I'm sort of feeling my way through still.
I couldn't use first person myself because I'm using first person in the nonfiction chapter I've written about the Count and the grave robbing and all of these things. And in that chapter, I'm making it very clear about how upset I am in the nonfiction. So for the fiction, where I'm trying to bring justice, I needed to have a framework character who's watching all of this. So I really did need an observer character who's seeing all this go down, and then I get to channel my rage through her, that this is not right and proper. And so her Victorianness helps with that, of that this is not right nor proper. So the idea of that old world of her and the older world of the goddess she summons, of that timeline and being out of time and being unprepared for the modern world for her of the 20th century. But because I'm often so in my fiction, I'm so in the 19th century, I often forget that we are in fact in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've like referred to the 20th century and my friends are like,
oh no, for
I mean,
sure. Yeah.
It's the
Same.
actually the 21st now. So so for me it was just like how it was purely a framework, because I have written first person, but I tend to default more towards third person close POV. Usually I've been trying to simplify and not get too many different POVs. So especially for this particular character where she is the framework character, it's all through this ghost's perspective. And that was the only way I could get my head around it. I was actually so upset by the original source text of the story that I had a very hard time writing this piece for this anthology, because I cared so much and I wanted to get it right, and what to include from the actual horrors and what not was tough.
Wow.
This is a great topic, Jason. My current novel I'm working on is first person, like 75-80% kind of in the style of The Martian, with some person limited to kind of help on the side. But I labor at the beginning of anything on in the right voice. I've used second person, I've used first person plural. Like
Wow. Both of those sound really hard.
It's stories. It's really hard to sustain these things. But yeah, and I guess you can always take parts and kind of see if the story springs to life or not, right, in the early stages. But you're really loath to do it halfway through a long work, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. One of the things that I've found really difficult, and I know even like Stephen King has found this like super difficult, is if you choose to write your story in first person, you will eventually run into a problem where an important thing will happen that you are not there for. And you got to figure out, well, how do I sell this extremely dramatic thing that has happened that I wasn't present for? And, usually, what is it, a phone call? Is it like what, but, I think people choose the first person, especially first person present tense, for the immediacy of it. I've done both, right now I'm trying third person present for the novel I'm writing right now, which I've never done before. But it's I just read None of This Is True, and I was struck by the effectiveness of third person present. And I was like, oh, I want to try that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was the present tense that was harder for me than the first person point of view. I mean, plus all my characters are trapped in a lake and they're dead.
Right.
So we're already limited in that respect, but
That is inconvenient.
it
Yes.
is. The Hunger Games was also told in first person present, which was told on purpose because Katniss needed to be an unreliable narrator, so there was always a bit of does she die at the end? I'm not 100% sure. There could be something here. But while I was reading that trilogy, I had a hard time because I kept stopping going, is that a typo? No, this is present tense. It's written that way on purpose. And I had to write this story very carefully, the Ghost Lake Mermaid. So, but that made me, it all makes us better writers. Pushing our boundaries makes us better
Yeah.
writers.
Well, and the funny thing is, this is really just flavor, right? Because everything I just said about the immediacy, the truth is that can be true of any tense. It can be true, because it's all, sometimes you're keeping the reader at arm's length. And sometimes you want them really close and you want a great deal of immediacy. And honestly, you can do that with any tense. But you might just decide this story is going to work well. Like if you think of like classic adventure fiction of the mid-century, I love James Bond novels. Every single one of those, except for the weird one, are all in third person past. Just straight, good old-fashioned Bond woke up thinking that maybe you shouldn't had so many drinks, whatever. It's always this. And it could be uh Leanna, the weird one is The Spy Who Loved Me. And it is a weirdly you know what? Less said the better. You should check it out or don't, really, honestly. But it's told from the first person perspective of a woman who meets James Bond. And I mean, Ian Fleming was probably capable of many, many things, but I'm not sure that that was the right choice for him. But you know what? Good on him for trying something. So, and it was a good title. So there we go. All right. Well, I know that I've kept you all. I know you have families to get to. Uh, I have been so honored to spend time with you talking about the Newcastle of Horror anthology. Once again, anybody listening to this, you can pick it up on Kindle and paperback. It's got a wonderful cover by Insure Yo, who also does the introduction. He is our co-publisher and my better half in the world, I guess. And thank you so much, and it's an honor to be with all of you, and I hope to talk to you all again. Night.
Good night.
Thank you so
Night.
Good
much.
night.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jason.
so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.